Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast. Powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. With Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson, bringing you all the chatter that matters.
Well, we're getting towards that awards season now, Curtis. I feel there seems to be a lot of activity around shortlists and nominated and things going on.
Yeah, definitely. Motor Trader this week announced the shortlist for its forthcoming awards. LinkedIn has certainly been very busy with the nominees posting that they've been shortlisted. So good luck to all of them.
Yeah, and then AM Live, everybody's signing up to get to AM Live in November as well now. So that's everyone's getting the fees that everybody's attending and looking at getting some networking done down there and conversations and things like that. So yeah, you just get that feeling now. We're just in that events awards period now, aren't we? Getting towards that final quarter of the year. But we're obviously mid-September, still a lot to sort of find out what's going to happen in the month of September. But we've got a few shout-outs this week, haven't we, to begin with?
We have indeed, yeah, and a couple of shout-outs from friends of the pod, including Sarah Sillars, who's an old industry friend of mine. She was the former CEO of the IMI, and she was in touch with me regarding applications for the position of CEO of the IMI, following the recent announcement that Steve Nash will be retiring. Now, the closing date for applications was Friday, but Sarah told me that anyone listening to the podcast who is interested and haven't submitted an application for the post of CEO to just message her directly on LinkedIn. And she is keen to have a diverse and long list of candidates to choose from, and she's actually chairing the recruitment team there at the IMI.
Yeah, so a fantastic opportunity for the right person, that one. So if you are listening to the podcast and you do fancy that, then as Curtis said, do reach out to Sarah and get your name in the hat. Some big shoes to fill with Steve Nash there, but when we big opportunities with some of their strategic restructuring and what they're looking at doing at the IMI. So big opportunity for somebody with that one.
Yeah, definitely. And second shout out comes from friend of the pod, Ian Godbold, industry consultant, friend of the show. We've had him on a number of times over the years, and he's probably due back on, isn't he?
He will be. I don't think he'd never miss the opportunity for coming on. So I know you'd be listening, doing either your exercise or eating what looked like a big breakfast, Ian. It's probably due that you do come back on and talk through some of the activities that you've been up to over the summer period, should we say.
Yeah, definitely. And he was in touch regarding a video that he's posted, and it will resonate with a lot of listeners because it's about cost per leads and using cost per lead as a key metric. And within the video, he's talking about how someone contacted him about one of the marketplaces who no longer uses cost per lead. And that's got Ian sort of talking about why it remains such a key metric for dealers, and there's been a number of comments in response to the video. So do head over to LinkedIn. If you're linked in with Ian, then just find that post, which was only posted, I think, towards the beginning of the week, for around Tuesday time. But there's a great video from him there,
and we'll try and put a link to it on the newsletter on Monday morning, where you'll get all the headlines from this weekend, won't you?
Yeah.
And finally, if you've not listened to it on your podcast feed, we have the pleasure again of interviewing and having a chat with Steve Young, industry guru from ICDP, talking all things electrification, tariffs, agency, new brands, after sales, and a lot more. And as always, we always try and keep it quite tight because we can there's so many topics that we can discuss with Steve. But if you haven't listened to that already, there has been some great feedback on it, some great comments, especially around the after sales topic that he chats through. But that is on your podcast feed, so do check that out if you've not listened to it already.
And we will have an extract from that later in today's show.
You're listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors.
Headlines this week come from Auto Retail Agenda, Car Dealer, AM and Motor Trader, starting with Volkswagen Group network cuts confirmed as OEM moves to reduce partners and locations across the UK. Jaguar dealers in for a messy year, says JLR boss Rawdon Glover. Big Motoring World consolidates business by closing Peterborough Werrington used car supermarket site. Most after-sales customers are actually open to upsell offers, according to new research from Tjekvik. And we have the latest dealer group year ends from Vospers and Vindis.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. If you're a supplier and would like us to profile your business and reach our audience of dealer bosses, managers and decision makers on one of our dedicated supplier specials episodes, get in touch with Curtis and Philip at motortraderadio@yahoo.com.
So looking at the first of those headlines from Auto Retail Agenda, the headline there is VW Group network cuts confirmed. So this follows a fair bit of industry speculation over recent weeks, and Auto Retail Agenda have actually got confirmation from a spokesperson at Volkswagen Group. So this is the state of play, as we see it at the moment. So Volkswagen Group is planning to reduce both the number of retail partners and the number of locations for its portfolio of brands across Audi, Seat, Skoda, Cupra and Volkswagen. So VW Group currently has 132 retail partners, and they operate 519 new car franchises across the UK. And these sales points are operated from 447 showrooms. So that's the numbers as they stand at the moment. But Auto Retail Agenda, following earlier reporting, has found that VW Group is aiming to shrink that to just 25 partners. Now, Volkswagen Group has not confirmed or denied that, but it has confirmed that it will be operating from a smaller base.
Yeah, I mean, there is reports that VW have been going through a bit of a restructure, and it's a kind of a phased out restructure for their network. But as you say there, I think there's been a lot of conversation around this, and there is an investor that has commented in the Auto Retail Agenda release there that VW Group is trying to have one retail group per geographic area representing all the brands, but there hasn't been a set time frame. So it's, I suppose you question, it's kind of, is it that, as we were talking with Steve, isn't it, this transition to the agency model in whatever form that takes, and having these fewer geographic locations and fewer partners makes that transition a little bit easier for them in many ways.
Yeah, and the stage is really set now for quite a major shakeout, because as the story reports, that currently the network operates, there's only 11 retail groups within the VW Group network that currently have new car contracts with all its car brands. So that's only 11. And, the suggestion here is that it'll be 25, down from 132. So there's lots more to come on this story. And I do urge you to check out the story on Auto Retail Agenda, because there are some fairly detailed comments from the spokesperson from VW Group, because they say this project has been underway for a while. There will be consolidation in the number of partners, and as a result, there will be a reduction in the footprint of the network and number of sites on the ground. And it does actually go on to say the majority of conversations have already kicked off. And I think that's probably an unfortunate phrase about it, already kicked off, because you can imagine what the sentiment is at the moment within the VW Group network.
Yeah, and I think we talked about a couple of stories recently, haven't we, where there's been groups losing VW and other groups taking VW on for the first time or expanding their VW representation. So you kind of feel that it's already starting to happen, where these partnerships and preferred partners are starting to wash through. So it's going to be one that I suspect Curtis will be talking about for a while yet, particularly on probably the M&A acquisitions area, more than anything else. So we'll keep an eye on that one. And talking about unrest within the OEM space, and heading over to car dealer, and this is Jaguar dealers are in for a messy year, says JLR boss Rawdon Glover. And this is that the current model range to go off sale in November. First new all-electric Jaguar is due in 2026, and that Jaguar-owned boutiques to open in London, Paris and Shanghai, and that current Jaguars to be serviced at Land Rover dealerships. I mean, just in those 4 bullet points, Curtis.
Yeah. Where do you start? So this we covered this story a couple of months ago when it was first reported that Jaguar will be ending the sale of new ICE vehicles this year. Now, it doesn't have any replacement vehicles because it's going to a new EV platform. So from 2026, it'll have a new range of fully electric cars. So it does leave the Jaguar network in limbo throughout 2025 because it won't have any new cars to sell. The story actually clarifies that Jaguar's plan to end ICE sales will actually happen in November this year. So, that is looming. That really is. And from 2026, the new EVs will be launched, but they will be all new. And as the story clarifies, they're not new versions of anything. They're all new. So Jaguar has really been hit by this perfect storm. I mean, the timing, it couldn't have been worse, because phasing out ICE, introducing EV, and having 12 months limbo between.
Yeah, and there is a few statements in the story from Rawdon saying that realistically, on our current trajectory, it will be a while before they are going to have cars in their showroom again. And that's something we are all going to have to navigate through in the very short term. It's just as well that the rest of the range is expanding, and we've got lots of options with Defenders and those sort of things that will tide them over. So, you can see it from the business. They're trying to obviously look to the future. They're trying to get that new product range in line. I know they've faced some challenges, and they're trying to keep that dealer network alongside them as they go through this. But I think you just feel that they're going to be in for a little bit of a challenging period, should we say, over the next 12 months.
Yeah, and especially those soulless Jaguar dealers who, they'll have used cars and they'll have after sales to fall back on, but they won't have the Land Rover and Range Rover cars to sell. So we will be returning to this story. It's inevitable, and I do suspect there'll be sort of further shakeouts within the Jaguar Land Rover network as a result of this.
And sticking with car dealer, and this is the story that Big Motoring World consolidates business by closing Peterborough Werrington used car supermarket and saying that they've announced the closure of the site and that the store's staff, stock and sales operations will move across town to Peterborough Fengate showroom, and that the newly refurbished premises will be renamed Big Motoring World Peterborough from October the 1st. And I think you kind of know this area a little bit better than I do, but this is basically, they've got two sites, haven't they, in a similar postcode territory in Peterborough, haven't they?
Yeah, and this goes back to when Big Motoring World acquired SW Car Supermarket back in October 2021, and that included the two sites in Peterborough. So I think what we're seeing, because initially when I saw this headline, we're so used to seeing Big Motoring World opening sites, not closing sites. But I think this is more to do with housekeeping. It's a tidy up. They've clearly looked at the logistics and the sort of financial value of having two sites in the same area. Now, one site, the Fengate site, specialised in family cars, whilst the Werrington site specialised in premium cars. Now, Fengate has undergone a major renovations, since Big Motoring World acquired the site. So what they're doing is consolidating both businesses within that Fengate site, and they will rebrand that as Big Motoring World Peterborough. So just one site to cover the whole of the city.
Yeah, and there is comment here from Loris Vaughan, who's the CEO, saying that the newly consolidated site is expected to stock up to 600 vehicles, and it'll form a key part of Big's ambitious growth strategy, and that they remain determined to grow their network to become the clear market leader in the car supermarket sector. So as you say, it feels that there's a little bit of housekeeping, a little bit of sort of efficiencies of location and things like that, that they've invested now in that Fengate site in terms of that refurbishment, and obviously operationally they're moving everybody across anyway from the other site, aren't they? So it feels like it's efficiency playing a key role in this.
We'll be back after the break with an extract from our chat earlier in the week with ICDP's Steve Young.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on Motor Trade Radio. Powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media, available on demand, wherever you are on your podcast feed.
As always, it's great to have you on, and I think Curtis summed it up quite well there. I mean, there's a lot going on at the minute that's keeping everybody busy, and definitely yourself busy. So, we can't not have a conversation without starting off talking about electrification. I mean, we're seeing now indications, reports that some of the OEMs are holding back on selling ICE vehicles in an attempt to meet their ZEV mandate for 2024. I mean, thinking ahead, how do you think this will hit the dealers? Because obviously, some of these reports have been coming out from industry leaders in some of the media around some of the challenges around what's been happening from some of the OEMs and the impact on their performance. Is this something that you're seeing and hearing across the UK and Europe?
At the moment, it's UK only because the targets don't really come in the EU until next year, and then in a slightly different format. But we'll, I'm sure, see it next year in Europe. In the UK, this is something that we anticipated months ago. As soon as they started to think about the ZEV mandate, then it was pretty clear that there's two ways to reach your numbers. One is to sell more ZEVs, and the other is to sell less ICE. And in particular, what ICE cars you do sell, you try to get the richest mix you can, the most profit. So it's almost two different worlds. Go back to the product shortage, chip shortage days post pandemic on ICE. What you get is limited choice of high spec cars, and sell like crazy on BEV with all the negative things around pre-reg and so on. So it's not a surprise that it happened. It's we've got pre-reg, we've got cycling demos faster, we've got massive discounts in some cases, and ratios for both fleet buyers and dealers to try and force the ZEVs through. It's not pretty, but it's not a surprise either.
I mean, that was just a short extract there from Steve Young on that interview from earlier in the week. And say, if that doesn't just give you a flavour of the type of the conversation that Curtis and I had with Steve, then I don't know what will. So I think, if you definitely have a listen to that. And as I said right at the start of today's podcast, talking about the focus from the network on aftersales and the importance that, Steve's trying to identify across the dealer network, both in the UK and across Europe, as the opportunities that sit within the aftermarket whilst we go through this transition to electrification. I don't know what you thought of that one, Curtis.
I really enjoyed our chat with Steve. It's been a couple of months since we last spoke to him, and the short list of topics that we drew up to have that conversation with him about was actually quite long, long enough for probably a couple of episodes. So it's a great insight into what's happening in the sector at the moment. And as you say, he does talk quite a bit about aftersales and the sort of overlooked importance of aftersales, which actually fits in rather neatly with our next story, which is from AM Online, where the headline is 72% of aftersales customers open to upsell offers, research shows. So this is research that was carried out by Tjekvik, who are a digital after-sales specialist, and indeed they were featured in our very first supplier special. So it's a company that we've got to know very well. They're based in Denmark. They're rolling out across the UK, and this is a piece of research they've done, and that they found that nearly 3/4 of after-sales customers are actually open to being upsold additional products and services when checking in their vehicles for service, repair, or MOT jobs. And within this, the survey found that 31% of customers are either very interested, and 41% are somewhat interested in learning about value-added products during their visits. And it does actually single out that service plans are the most in-demand product, with 39% of respondents showing interest, followed by things like seasonal checkups at 34% and oil top-ups at 28%.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great. I mean, when we had that conversation with Nick Pratt, and we'll share a snippet after this just to sort of give you a flavour of what they do, because Nick was, like Curtis said, he was one of our first supplier special interviews there as they entered the UK market. But you can see there that non-invasive, it's through the system, and you think about Bumper, for argument's sake, a friend of the podcast again, who have done very well, and that service plan, that that usage of spreading servicing costs over time and paying for servicing and things like this, it's really playing into that consumer demand at the minute, isn't it?
Yeah, and one of the things that really stood out in the story for me was they look at some of the demographics around after sales, and they found that younger drivers, so those aged between 18 to 24 actually showed the highest level of interest in upsells, with 60% saying they would be very interested, while older drivers, those aged over 65, were the least engaged, with 45% expressing little or no interest. So, I think there's some interesting insights there for dealers, certainly workshop managers.
Yeah, the interesting stat in this one is when they look at the regional activity around it, and so Northern Ireland emerged as the most receptive market, with 92% respondents open to upsell offers, whilst in the West Midlands it was down at 34%. So yeah, some interesting geographic views of that one. So I say we did have Nick Pratt on from Tjekvik on the podcast. So I'll play a little quick snippet just to give you a flavour, because he explains what they do as a business. I'll play that now. Can you just give the listeners some background on the business, just to give them a sort of where you are, where you've come from, and what it is?
Cool. Yeah, no problem. We're a Danish company, which accounts for the funny name. Although when you say it, it's a lot makes it much clearer than when you first look at it in print. And we started in 2015 when our founders, who both worked in the automotive sector, realised that they were facing more and more pressure at the beginning and the end of the day with customer volumes. And there's a very nice picture which we show as part of our sales presentation, which just shows an actual queue at a business in Copenhagen. And so what they resolved to do was say, how can we affect this? Because we can't keep recruiting people. And so they thought, okay, well, let's see how we can digitize this process. And that's how we came about. We started off with a kiosk to collect keys, and we became our digital colleague. So we've been going, as I say, since 2015. We are across the whole of Europe. We're also into the Middle East and lastly Australia.
Definitely a company to watch there, and I do notice their check-in facilities, which are either in the showroom or outside of the showroom for out of hours usage. They are popping up at more and more dealerships across the UK.
Yeah, exactly. So the last couple of stories for today are some dealer financial updates, and as Curtis said right at the start of the show, that's one from Vospers and from Vindis, and these are both for the full year trade in 2023, of which we've covered a few of them lately, so they're starting to come out. Not as many of the half year trading announcements yet, Curtis, but definitely some of the full year 2023s.
Yeah, and starting with the car dealers report on Vospers, the headline there is "Bosses at family-run Vospers warn of automotive trade war as profits slump in latest accounts." So there's a fair bit in this story about what Vospers think about the UK putting tariffs on Chinese imported vehicles. So, I do urge you to check out the story for that. But I think for the purposes of today's pod, we're more interested in the financials. So this is based on the annual accounts that were registered with Companies House, and covering the 12-month period to the end of December 2023 showed that the Plymouth-based multi-franchise group made a pre-tax profit of just over £1 million last year, and that figure presents a decline of almost 80% on 2022, when the dealer group reported a profit of just under £5 million. EBITDA also slipped from £6 million to £3.6 million. And the story goes on to point out that this disappointing result was achieved against turnover that was actually up 7.2% year on year to £270 million. And that actually follows on from those reports that you mentioned, Phil, from certainly the last couple of podcasts where we've looked at the 4-year figures. And there is this recurring theme of turnover going up, profits going down on what was a tough year last year for certainly new retail sales.
Yeah, and there's definitely a running theme with all of these, and as you said, without getting into all the detail, because it is a common theme right across them all. They're obviously talking about the lagging of private retail customers in the new car market, which we've seen through the SMMT figures throughout last year and into this year, and the challenges faced around that battery electric vehicle market and what's happening there. And we only need to look at the headlines coming out of any of the trade magazines, trade medias that are talking around, what's happening around the pressures from an OEM perspective and what's happening in the retail and profitability for the market. So again, not unexpected, but it is along that similar kind of running theme. And Vindis, not dissimilar. Going over to motortrader.com, Vindis reports increased revenues and reduced profits in 2023. And that they're saying that Vindis battled with inflammatory headwinds as 2023 and delivered a pre-tax profit of 107,000 on turnover of 436.1 million, and saying that was in a sharp contrast to the prior year, where the pre-tax profit saw 10.3 million on a turnover of 378 million. So a big shift there for the Vindis group. But again, talking about those similar sort of challenges as we just talked about with Vospers.
Yeah, and worth pointing out that Vindis Group, again, it's a family-owned business based in Cambridgeshire, multi-franchise across a lot of those Volkswagen Group brands that we mentioned at the top of the show. And the story does actually point out that the 2022 accounts included an £8.7 million exceptional item, which was generated by the sale of 5 properties. But within this story, it does say that the new car market saw more push marketing in 2023. This is as reported in its accounts as the year progressed, while the used car sector was hit by softening margins as values fell. So definitely a recurring theme here.
Yeah, and I think both Vospers and Vindis are great businesses, good operators, and to put a bit of context in probably all the stories we talked about with the 2023 trading period, that was on the back of a strong 2022 trading period. So when you're doing a like for like for year on year, you've got to sort of remember how strong 2022 was in that bounce back through that pandemic. We weren't facing the supply pressures for used cars. The margins were strong, and we weren't facing that big push, as you said, Curtis, for the ZEV mandate from the manufacturer. So 2022 might have been like a bit of an exceptional year for the sector. So 2024 will be an interesting one. We'll see where that one starts to play out. So yeah, I'm sure we'll get through some more of these 2023 trading and then start to think about what does this year look like for the retailers. So hopefully a couple of interesting podcasts for you to maybe look up if you've not had a listen to those already. As I say, Steve Young, fascinating chat with Steve. Always is with Steve, and he gives you a lot of things to think about, very considered in what he's doing and talking about there. So if you've not listened to that one already, then do head over to your podcast feed for that one. And again, a little bit older in your podcast feed, so you might have to search this one. But if you want to hear a little bit more from Nick and what Tjekvik do within the sector, if you're not aware of them already, then do check that one out. And it's worth a listen to the full podcast there. We did only show you I share you a very small snippet of Nick saying where Tjekvik are and where they've come from. But full interview will give you a little bit more detail around what they do and why they do it and how they do it as well.
And we'll have links to both of those interviews in our newsletter that goes out on LinkedIn Monday morning. But that's all for now. So many thanks for joining us on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. Until next week, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Thank you for listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. We'll be sharing all the URLs from this week's headlines on Monday morning. To make sure you receive them, just subscribe to the free newsletter on our LinkedIn page. Just search Motor Trade Radio Podcast.